all who believe. For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and are justified by his grace as a gift, through the redemption that is in Jesus Christ, whom God put forward as a propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance he had passed over former sins. It was to show his righteousness at the present time, so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Jesus was perfect. Not good, not, he's really decent. No, he's perfect. And we, on the other hand, have all messed up. And that's one of the points that Lewis is making here. The big ghost is an embodiment of entitlement. I think that we as people, myself very much included, fall into this trap. Well, I've done X and Y and Z, so clearly I deserve blank. And in some situations, people might be inclined to agree with you. Yeah, you do deserve blank. But this is not one of those cases. This will never be one of those cases. And so the Spirit, on the other hand, is saying, none of us are perfect. None of us are deserving of any of this. And any thought otherwise is simply untrue. Heaven is where God dwells, where Christ is. Heaven is perfection on a scale that we are not capable of ever achieving or even really comprehending. 1 John chapter 1, beginning in verse 10, it states that if we say we have not sinned, we make him a liar, and his word is not in us. And if you go back a verse to verse 9, we're told, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. The Spirit also makes it a point that none of them in heaven is getting what they deserve. They're not getting what they're entitled to. And that's a really good thing. But how do you reconcile the idea of a murderer, someone who at one time had hate in their heart, being in this place of perfection? How can they be in the same place as someone who committed tax fraud and was forgiven? That's not how the world works. The ghost doesn't get it. And that's the next thing that Lewis is trying to hit on. The fact that comparing these sins is a complete waste of time, because Christ's death cleanses all sins. The author paints this by presenting two extremes. On the one hand, there's a murderer, and on the other, there's someone who made life a little harder for those around him. And those sound like two very different cases, right? Surely more made life a little harder. Very different cases, right? Surely more grace is going to be given to the one who did less of a bad thing. That's not how God views it. He doesn't view it as, well, being mean to your coworkers doesn't get you much punishment, but murder means prison. That's not how it works. If we look at Proverbs chapter 6, beginning in verse 16, we get one of many passages in the Bible that gives a long list of different sins. I want to pay special attention to the scale of each of these wrongdoings. Again, beginning in verse 16. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Did you catch that? Haughty, that means prideful. So we have prideful eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. We went from lying to murder real quick there, because to God, all of them are sin. When you physically harm someone else, you stray further from God. When you gossip about someone, no matter how small the gossip is, you're straying further from God. Now, I am not saying that you should ever think like, well, I've already gossiped about him, and I don't want him to find out, so I might as well kill him. Sin is sin. No, that's crazy. That's not how it works either. But to God, there is no sin small enough that it doesn't impact you going to heaven, but there's also no sin so big that you can't choose Christ and have that sin forgiven. Now, that's a real issue to the ghost in Lewis's story here. He admits he wasn't religious, but at least he didn't kill someone. I mean, Jack is dead because of Len, and he gets to be forgiven, and I don't. Who's running this show? The big ghost's lack of understanding leads him away from choosing a life in heaven and to instead focus on comparing his wrongdoings to those of others, when he could just accept that they've all been forgiven. But the Spirit is trying to explain to him, we've been saved from the simple and mundane sins and the life-changing ones. God's grace extends to everyone. The book of Hebrews, in the second chapter, beginning in